Hey guys, looking forward to beginning my conversation with Justin Nope. He is, I'm very fortunate to have a few business coaches that I work with. Justin will be joining soon. He is a high performance brain coach, but he specializes in many things. He just joined right now. His business is 222 Consulting, and he'll be joining soon. I'm at right now at Sarai Bespoke showroom here in Gastown, Vancouver. Justin will be joining any second, so feel free to ask any questions. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Hey Jason, I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Very well, thanks. Is my sound okay?
It's
My
perfect.
headphones wouldn't go over my fedora. I couldn't compromise. The sun is hitting down on my bald head, and it would cause too much shine.
Too much
So,
glare.
no,
No,
I
no,
just want
no.
to one do an introduction. I was just saying, Justin Ope is a high performance brain coach, but I think that's not fully telling your true story. But you're based in
Mm,
California now,
yep.
originally from England. You've done a fair amount of traveling over these past few years. And before you share your story, I just want to share like how we met. Um,
It's
we
a great
met
story.
by complete chance. Justin and I were on our way to England. We were sitting beside each other, and as I was about to sit down, he was like, "Those are really nice double monk straps," and it was such a random comment. Most people wouldn't have acknowledged my shoes or had it said that. And as we started to sit down, my initial thought was like, okay, this is a long flight, and sometimes you don't know who you're going to be paired up with and how long these conversations can go. And by chance, Justin had the Tools of Titans book by Timothy Ferriss, and it's in the back. And that wasn't set up. I think that's is that Titans? I
Yeah,
think
that's Tools of Titans. Yeah.
Skills of Titans. So yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know he had the Mentors book as well. So when we started to converse about that, I was actually thinking about bringing that book along for my trip to England before I was heading off to Pidiomo, and this was in January of, I believe, 2018.
Maybe
Or 2017.
2017.
It was
Yeah.
2017. Yes. So it was a beautiful conversation that actually transpired to be 6 hours of our flight. And we went on to speak about so many things about entrepreneurship, business, values, philosophy. And I got to learn how truly special and well-rounded, well-versed Justin is. And it was through there that we actually began coaching on learning Italian. But I think that was just one component. It was more so about learning how to rewire my brain to perform at a maximal level, and learn about neuroplasticity, learning about the ability to retain certain information and let go of things that we don't need to hold on to, and how to be able to extract information when we do need it, and how the brain is such a big muscle that can be trained. And in the world of what Justin specializes in, I've learned that so much of what we understand in the world of memory and the world of brain is through brute force techniques and not backed by science and methodology of like how to actually approach this from an elegant way. And I think that kind of sums up a component of what I do in the work of my coaching that I do with Justin. Is all across this gambit of how to maximize my performance as an individual and to cater a specific program to help me retain information, improve my memory, improve my neuroplasticity through science and sound research. So Justin being an expert in the space, I felt with what we're doing with live IG conversations, this was a great platform to one, introduce Justin, who he works with friends and clients of mine already, and to have a good conversation about a topic of adaptability and resilience. So Justin, if you can explain a little bit more on things I missed, I apologize if I didn't articulate that correctly.
No, you did a fantastic job, Jay. Yeah, I don't know what necessarily people want to know about anything, any background of my story. So if you're watching or you're in the live right now, just
I
let
would
us
say,
know.
like one thing is like, what is a high performance brain coach? And when, because there is many aspects and facets to it, how would you share if someone's like, what is that?
So I think the easiest way to say it is that when you talk about the brain, there's so many different people and specialists, and a coach, in essence, I think about a coach very similar to a trainer on a track, right? So athletics trainer. Then you've got the word coach and brain. Okay, great. Now, whenever you talk about brain coaching, you can talk about it from a place where you're suffering an issue and you want to get back to normalcy,
Yes.
or you're at normalcy and you want to get above normalcy. And so I always talk about the -1, the 0, and then the +1. And so when you talk about high performance, you're talking about going from 0 to +1.
Yes.
So although I have it in my capacity to help people who are at a -1 to get to 0, that's not necessarily my forte. And although I enjoy it, I think that there are specialists out there because there's so many considerations with medical things and chemical balances, any kind of like weird, very specific contextual things that for me it's like those are interesting, but they're definitely not what I'm interested in
Yes.
particularly. So I like taking people who are all right, cool. They've been taught how to be a certain way throughout their lives because of the culture, because of schooling, their education, their families, whatever it is. And they've got a certain frame of seeing the world. And taking those people and helping them level up. And this could be in multiple ways. This could be learning languages. And you think about what you've learned about languages from schools, and none of what schools do actually is supported by science. It's all like we talk about brute force solution, or like
Yeah.
a school, traditionally schools will teach grammar. And when you actually go into the reasoning of why they teach grammar, it's because we can test grammar.
Yes.
So there's no point in
Yeah.
teaching something if they can't test it, which is ridiculous.
And what I like from a sports background and just understanding that the whole blanket approach of coaching and learning, it may be applicable to a small group of that, group that you're coaching and teaching, but there is going to be individuals that do get left out, and it's beyond where they're at, or there's going to be a group that need a more specialized at a higher level.
Yeah.
So I think it's not curated and catered in a manner that's specific to the individual, which is why I really enjoy life coaching, business coaching, specialized coaching, whether that be of the mind, of the body, on
Exactly.
the business. And when we look at what's happening in the world today and our topic that we're speaking about adaptability and resilience, I think it's a great conversation for us to, one, just openly chat about this with no script, to hear how does the brain, go through a component of this? How can we come out of this in a manner that, we're not too far set back, as well as we're approaching this with a game plan, as opposed to just randomly approaching, whether it be on the health side, the business side, on the friendship side. There's many layers that we can go into on this, but what is your thoughts on just the words adaptability and resilience, and then how does that relate to the current time we're in?
So it's actually quite interesting because initially when I discuss these words with people, they've got set ideas about what does it mean? What does adaptability mean? And so when people try and define it, adaptability, they're like, yeah, it's your ability to adapt, adjust, but actually it's the capacity to be able to modify use or purpose, right?
Yes.
And that's a big deal. Whereas resilience is actually the ability to get hit and bounce back again. So it's more about flexibility, or if I can use the dictionary definition, they talk about pliability as well. So they say the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. So it's all about recovery, resilience, recovery. Adaptability is actually got to do with the changing modifications of purpose and use. And now those are the classic dictionary definitions. So if you think about it more like this, when you walk into a new situation, how quickly can you modify why you're there or what do you want to do according to your new situation? And it's that modification. So it's allowing the new context to become a part of your use, your purpose, your intention. Whereas I like to think of resilience like kind of like a safety net. You can develop the skill for resiliency as a way to kind of, oh, you know what, I didn't see that. I got blindsided and I got hit and I'm going to recover. And so how much do you have in recovery? So I think with athletics, you think about it like adaptability is very similar to agility, learning to read a situation. Let's say if we're talking football, soccer,
Yes.
you know, you're talking about reading the field and saying those are strong players. That guy, if I pass him on the left, he's not going to be very strong. And then you execute and you're able to modify how you play to match the scenario. Whereas resiliency is like, oh, I messed up. Oh my God, whoops.
Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't have done that. Can I get the ball back?
Definitely. So when we look at when you look at that sport analogy of saying, then you're reacting in a short time frame. And when we look at something like COVID, where people are anywhere between 4 weeks to 8 weeks, now you have a stretch of time, and there may be people that haven't been, you know, resetting and preparing for whatever this new norm is. Mm-hmm. So it's like when you have a stretch of time, is there a difference between the length of time and reacting? Like, so what can people do to improve their adaptability?
So, I mean, when you're in it and you're trying to modify your intention, it's really difficult, especially when you've got, you know, needs. It's hard for you to see the forest for the trees in situations like that. So one of the main things that people can do without actually affecting the physical reality is changing mindset. Because the best way to say it is, if you put a happy dog in a room full of mirrors, it's going to see other happy dogs. Yes. If you put a defensive dog that's, you know, on high alert, it's going to see other defensive dogs that might bark. Then all the other dogs in the room with mirrors will bark. So straight away, I say mindset is one of the first things that you can change. And when I say mindset, I mean the way that you organize and orientate information in your brain. Okay. And one of the things that you need to get away from is good or bad. And so when we're in situations like this and it's very difficult, we tend to label what we're doing. Oh, my business is failing because I'm not bringing in money. I'm a failure, and we tend to play out those roles.
And it can cascade, it can snowball because of the negativity.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a big deal. And this isn't like a lifestyle coaching situation where you need someone to just support you and believe in you. This is literally how the brain physically wires itself because of how you perceived things when you were a kid and how your nervous system told you to respond. Oh, you've got something bad happening. And so you respond by doing this thing which gets you attention from mom or dad, which means you're safe and you're protected. So it's never a bad thing. It's always just a good response that hasn't been upgraded yet. And so working with nervous system responses to stress is a big deal. And you can talk about it with material stress, anything in our physical world, or abstract stress. And situations like this, now it's an abstract stress, whereas if you see a tiger in front of you, that's more a physical stress.
Yes, and this is the hard part is a lot of people, the information we're getting is strictly from news sources, and there's so much negativity in there.
What do you believe?
There's also, you don't know, you know, from which source, what to believe, what not to believe. Right. And then it is overly compounded by negativity. So with that external factor, you're saying that it starts internally first of how we organize it. And then
exactly.
It also then means that how you were saying the dog analogy of it, of what you're surrounding. So who it is that you're surrounding yourself with in terms of what you're consuming, the communication of who you're speaking with, the outlets of information that we have. These are all things that go into this.
Yeah, I think the dog analogy is also this idea of if you approach something with the attitude of it's positive, then you're going to see positivity. You're going to see resources to create something. And there's a lot of studies that show when you've got a lot of the serotonin, dopamine, all these positive balances of hormones and neurotransmitters in your brain, you are going to be 30% more creative, more productive. Cognitively, you're going to be able to do better tasks, better problem solving, etc. So
Yeah.
straight away, shifting from negative thinking and mindsets where you can't see a result, all you see is reasons why you won't succeed. The first thing is shifting out of that. And the more you practice that, like adaptability is defined as capacity. We use the word capacity. Do you have the capacity? And I like to tell people that capacity is kind of like a muscle. You always have some capacity. And the more you exercise that capacity, the greater it becomes. So your capacity to modify what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, when we talk about your why are you doing Style by Sarai? What's the, what's the intention behind that? And then maybe, in 20 years, you'll change your intention behind that because your values aren't the same anymore. And your ability to then modify what it is that you're doing is very important, because if there's an inability, you don't have the capacity to let go of that old Style by Sarai, let's say, skin, shedding its skin.
Yes.
It'll be a very difficult time for you internally, and it'll show in your business where you won't be able to let go of things that are draining on the business as well. So
Yeah.
all of this, it kicks back into what we do, with our relationships, with our business, with our health, and it's all got to do with the development of yourself is the development that you'll see in all of these areas as well.
Well, the first few weeks was challenging. I'm not going to lie. There was just like this sheer unknown. We actually, from our business standpoint, doing work both in Europe and Asia, we were aware of what was happening and how it was, it was growing in terms of awareness in January and early February. And it was more so in March that North America as a whole was starting to react to it. But when we were on house arrest quarantining and self-isolation and social distancing, when we were going through that, the first few weeks were being, bombarded with so much information, stats, and I like numbers. So I did a deep dive in that space to then realize through working with my other coach, Heinrich, about, what is it that is in your control. And that was a big conversation to just let go of things that wasn't in my control. And it was to go back to foundational stuff within the business of the purpose, the values, the mission, to assess not only what remains true, and if COVID didn't happen, would we be even addressing these things? But the reality is it did happen. We have an opportunity to say that if something like this was to happen again, what would we have done differently? What would we have wanted to be prepared going into this? And I think this is the component of adaptability. It's such a great characteristic, skill set one can have, but I believe it's something that can be learned, it can be trained, and it can be improved. It's not something that you can ever become a true expert in it, because we don't have the ability to foresee variables that may change.
Exactly.
And one of my clients, his name's Jason Sarai, he actually brought up, so I don't want to pretend like this was something that I had read up and looked, but he was talking about adaptability quotient. And he was talking about it's not so much about IQ and now EQ with emotional quotient, it's about adaptability quotient. It's like, how good are you at the ability to adapt?
Yeah.
And when you look at Charles Darwin's famous quote, it's your ability to adapt and change. Those are the ones that are going to survive. So knowing that, and not everyone has access to a high performance brain coach or a lifestyle coach or a business coach. What is the process that you suggest to start? And how does one become either mindful, aware, both on a personal and business level?
So there's two separate sides to it. And the first one, and this comes from a friend of mine who's actually a very good business coach. And he always says, if you can't name your problem, that's where you need to put your work in, right? You need to be able to name what it is. And if you can't name it clearly enough, if you can't name it well enough, you'll know. You'll just feel that's kind of there. It's not quite there. You need to be able to name what the problem is.
Yes.
That's a big deal. After that, have you ever heard of systems theory?
Systems theory?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Systems theory is this idea that we're all, everything is a system, right? It's a harmony of things that work interdependently, and kind of like your body is a system of systems. And instead of saying human species, I always call it as a human system. You know, humans actually work interdependently, and they create systems in themselves. A family unit is actually a family system. A relationship is more like a romantic system or a friendship system or something like that. And so inside systems theory, the short end of it is, number one, identify what are the variables in this equation. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to adapt to your business, but you need to think about your kids. That's an easy one. Your kids will influence your business without a doubt. And you, new daddy, you can attest to that. Like,
for sure.
Just on the minimum basis, they're going to affect your sleep. And so you're not going to be quite as creative during the day. You need to adapt to that. You need to be able to, recover from that. And that's actually going to be your resilience, not your adaptability, modifying your purposes. I'm Jason Sarai, I'm also a dad now. That is going to be the adaptability. The recovery is really, well, can I cope with 3 hours of sleep at a time,
Yeah.
So
no, I know, that's so true. Because it is like, even with preparing, knowing that we were going this, when we found out in July of being pregnant, and then, having the birth of our daughter in March, in your mind, you can prepare for all of these things, but, the day that she arrived, my life changed, and the schedule, of course, changes with it. And until you actually, are forced to make some of these changes, even when you've come up with a game plan, the game plan doesn't always go as planned.
Never.
So it's like, how do you also not be too fixed?
Yeah.
And have the ability to pivot where needed, when you're still able to accomplish, but then you prioritize certain things where you're like, no, these things need to be able to be done, and I think that's where adaptability for me, it crosses so many components that I think it is something that we need to have that work in all components of our life.
Yeah.
And if we understand where our strengths and weaknesses lie within that space, and it's like, and we can mentally be in a position and then have the techniques to understand that if we build this skill and we build this awareness, we will be far better off when we do get, this adversity or obstacle that's thrown our way in the future.
But this is the, there's so much in this, and like, how do we put it all into like one IG live, like, right? Yeah. So just to go back onto those 3 points very quickly. Yeah. It's identify the values, right? Or the variables. What are you dealing with? What are the relationships between them? And then what is the modified purpose or the modified goal? Okay. When you talk about this as well, I talk about an accordion, right? So if you're training and you're doing exercise, let's say your accordion is that every day, come hell or high water, you're going to do these minimum things. And then if you feel good and you've got more time, you can do more, or you can do less, but basically just to make sure that you stay on schedule, you have a very, very, very minimal thing to do. And so this is the same with business. You create an accordion of like, I need to do 2 things today. And if everything else gets thrown away, just those 2 things are going to move the needle for me. And so that's a way for us to scale. And like, thankfully, my wife's going to take the baby today. So I've got more time and I've got more energy. I'm going to accomplish these other goals. And it kind of like contracts and expands like an accordion, like just like breathing, like life, like an organism. That's the best way to understand it. And then the third thing, that you were talking about is this, this idea that we need to develop our resiliency. And one of the most important things to remember is that as human animals, our brain is designed to try and not think. Our brain is a very expensive piece of equipment. It consumes 20% of all your body's energy. Now that's a lot. For 2% of the body mass, 20%. That's a very expensive organ. And the
Yeah.
main thing is when you find with like studying how people think, you'll see that people aren't actually malicious. They're more stupid than anything else. And you think, well, why are people making stupid mistakes? And then you go in and you discover the works of like Daniel Kahneman, you know, Thinking Fast and Slow,
Yes.
where you start to learn about cognitive biases, decision-making biases. And it's all of these little shortcuts that the brain takes so that you don't have to think about something. And it has the perception of, oh, it's stupid. It's a stupid decision. But it actually is an automatic, fast, default decision that your brain does. And that's when you start thinking, whoa, I make these mistakes too. Whoa, I'm calling that person stupid, but actually I do the same thing. Holy cow. And the number one way to get past that is just slow down. You're going to burn a lot more calories by thinking slowly. It's going to be very tiring. You know, what do? They measured chess players at a tournament burning 6,000 calories a day.
Yes.
I don't think that's quite accurate, but something like that, that's credible. But the point is that I'm sure you know that when you have to sit down and think and study or write an exam, you're exhausted by the end of it, even though you've done nothing. Mm. So the point is that to develop this capacity, it's one of those things of, should I save money today so I can buy that thing 2 years from now? Or should I just go out and enjoy my money today? And it's making that decision for long-term and short-term. And it's the same thing here. Do I really want to like do this hard work today? And the answer is, the more hard work you do today on adaptability and resilience, the more it's going to pay off. It's one of those things that's a long-term payoff, a short-term, you know, suck.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's like if so many people in the world are going to be impacted by this one way or another. So if you are in one of those, you know, categories, how do we look back and say, what could we have done differently?
Right.
That if it happened, we were unfazed. We didn't get impacted outside of, you know, from a health standpoint. When we're talking just from a personal and a business standpoint, that's where it's like we can go back to the drawing board to say, how do we approach this differently? And how do we build on these areas so that for future times that these, you know, variabilities or these variables change, whether it's for a positive or a negative, we have the ability to adapt. And I think it's like when you look at from a stoic standpoint, it's like you also get unfazed, like you remain just is. And it's something that because you put in all that work, you also realize that, okay, yes, this is an inconvenience. Yes, this is very challenging, but because of the work that has been done, you know, I'm in a position where I don't need to start from scratch. It's like if you do X amount of stuff, and that's something that I'm working on to build. It's like I'm not saying by any means that I'm an expert in this space. I went back to the drawing board. I also was firmly connected to my values and the purpose of the business, but that was going through years of, you know, writing them out. Do we actually believe in this? Do we actually question this with my business coach and our team? But then it's like, hey, let's see if this actually still in alignment. So when I think this time that we're in really has us question these kind of key skill sets that is needed by everyone. I don't think there's any downside for us to want to improve, you know, these spaces of our life.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So it's like when you had those 3 points, and can you remind just say them one more time, the three points of that you mentioned earlier?
So identify the variables involved. Yes. After that, what is the relationship between them? And then after that, it's establishing what is the purpose of what you're trying to do. And so this is where the definition of adaptability comes in, the capacity to modify your purpose or your use. So if you go,
makes you calm things down when you actually go through that. Like once by you saying this, I think it slows down to actually realize, okay, why am I, you know, getting so pent up on this? When you start writing it down, it makes you reflect, think, and be more calm. And I think I just finished the book by Ryan Holiday, Stillness is the Key.
Mm.
And it is about like just being calm and slowing down, and then, you know, making a decision after spending some time, and not being rash in your judgment or thought, and be too quick to react. Like what
Right,
you're saying, the
exactly.
resilience, when you get knocked down and get back up, it's still, you need to be mindful of not just reacting too fast, before that can have also something that can compound to make it even worse.
Exactly, exactly. The neuroscience behind this is actually quite interesting. With just for example, with breathing, there was an experiment done where people were doing just a business skills exam, and one group had to do breathing, box breathing, you know, five in, five hold, five out, five hold. One group did nothing, they just read a book or something like that. And the other group did something called skewed resonance breathing, which is
Yes.
that your exhale is longer than your inhale. And what that actually does when your exhale is longer than your inhale is it tells your body, we're okay, we're calm. Because if you think about it, if you've got a tiger in front of you, the type of panic breathing that you're going to have, it's very much bringing air in to the body because it's a way to prepare you to run, you know,
Mm.
to deal with oxygen, to have oxygen in your body to run. So anyway, the point is that the group that did this exhale longer type of breathing, not only did the groups that did the breathing report that they felt better and felt less stressed, but the group that did the exhale longer breathing, they actually performed better in the test by a noticeable significant factor. So even just when you go still, it's a lot of the time, it's actually just calming down the system and giving space for the brain to just not freak out and calm down the breath, number one. Number two is don't go into that default thinking network where your brain makes decisions for you, you know, and instead you start to make decisions autonomously, you know, a lot
That's
of the time.
amazing. I love that. Like
Yeah,
slowing down, controlling your breath, and then also, you know, controlling the thoughts of your mind. And I think, you know, they're far easier said than done.
mm,
But it's once again, it's something that you're, you know, we're in a position to control that.
mm-hmm.
And it puts us in a far greater position of strength, as opposed to being in a place where, you know, you can be under additional stress, be clouded by negativity, and it's in those kind of times that you can be making decisions that aren't in alignment with your, you know, your present and long-term goals.
Yeah,
So I think right now this is so foreign to the entire world of what we're in right now. And I think it's also okay to know that, yeah, it's okay to be scared and to be, you know, stressed.
yeah,
But then how do we take control of that, and try to do what's in our power to, you know, come back out of this, not only, you know, just better people and better individuals, and of course that will result in being better businesses as well.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I think people, and now it's like when we look at things like resilience, adaptability, so much gets brought into just business, and like these kind of business focused books about it. But I think this applies to all areas of life, whether you're in business or you're in community, charitable giving, you're a parent, you're an athlete. This is applicable across the entire gambit.
mm,
So when you look at that, and there's so much depth in these kind of areas, what do you suggest is like a good way beyond those two things? Like, is it something that, how do you repeat this so that it creates a habit, that it becomes a part of your hardwiring? Like, how does it become something that is more so automatic, that when it happens, okay, it's because I practiced this? Or like, that's just a question that I have.
yeah. That's a great question. I find that it's multiple components actually, but I think one of the strongest things that people can do, especially because you mentioned it occurs through all fields. You know, whether you're an athlete, you're in business, whether you're a mother, you know,
Yeah.
and you're stay at home, whether you're a grandmother and you're running a business, whatever the context is, it's about this idea of developing personal value systems, like what is important to you. and making sure that you
I
stay
love
with those
that.
value systems. So, and it's owning it without shame. If money is important to you, then that's fine. Money is important to you. But as soon as you start, let's say, lying about it, like you feel that money is an important one for you, but you feel that other people will make it somehow, like they will look down on you, and the
Yeah,
social relationship will be compromised because they're like, you're just greedy, you're a snake or something like that. Money's fantastic. I love money, but I'm not going to buy a Lamborghini with money. I'm rather going to, pay for a ticket so that my family can travel to me, like buy a ticket for my mom to come and visit me, because
yes,
family is important. Money enables that. Charity is important. Money enables that. Different systems, health is important. Money enables that. So, finding a positive way that you're happy with identifying with your values as well. I think that's one of the biggest things, because whatever you do, you're always going to express your personal values. And if other people are telling you your values, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to find stress comes a lot more.
totally. And it's like it's impossible to please everyone. Like at the end of the day, if we understand our intrinsic values, that should be our guiding force.
Yeah,
And then it's like
exactly.
that's how we should hold ourselves accountable to live those. But it's like once again, it's like determining what those values are. It's one
And
thing
they'll
to
always
look at,
change. They'll always
verbs
change.
and nouns and just like saying, hey, these are, values, but it's like you're
Uh-huh.
not connected to them.
Yeah.
And then in times of, these adversities that are thrown our way, it helps us like kind of reset to like, okay, I love this idea of just calming down, controlling breath, resetting against your values, and creating that kind of approach and game plan. Um, yeah, so I think that's it's a healthy reminder, because you know it's very easy to get swayed by a large component of people that may be focused in one element or one viewpoint.
And so this is what I was going to say as well. You mentioned this before, the stillness is the way, the Ryan
Yes.
Holiday book. And one of the other purposes of stillness, like people talk about meditation, and I actually say you've got a stillness practice. It doesn't matter if you're in quiet contemplation, looking at the stars, going for a walk. If you've got a stillness practice, what is that? And there's so many different things that you can do. And one of them is reflection. Reflecting in your stillness practice is very important. And when you talk about this idea of values and how can you see what your values are, a great way to do this is by reflecting on past decisions and say, what informed that decision? Like, what value is it? And you kick the tires on your decisions to see what values fall out, And that's a great way to kind of like keep going with your values. If you think these are your values, then write them down. And then in 3 months' time, reflect on any decisions that you've made, any kind of things that you've done. What are your actions? What is your behavior that you've taken? And then, see if those actions or behaviors reflect those values.
Well,
And
that's amazing. Yeah, you saying that because like each year we do a retreat for Style by Sarai, and we came on our second one this year. And in 2018 when we did the first one, we went through the purpose of Style by Sarai, the core values, and those are living values. And of course, the business originally started with me, so they were my values. And as the team grew, we needed to make sure that there was alignment within these values, and
right,
how they were articulated. Did it resonate with the rest of our team?
exactly.
And this exercise that we went through was incredibly eye-opening, because it allowed us to question and challenge, do we actually believe in them? But then, like you said, it's like there's also actions that hold us accountable against them. And it's like, are we actually living them?
Yes.
And that's such a big component of looking at the values, and having that as something that is going to be like, okay, regardless of what hits you in life, you do know that these are still things that you stand beside, both on behind, and is foundation both on a personal and a business level.
And
So
this is exactly something that, like this exercise right here, is an exercise where you actually practice adaptability. You exercise your capacity, because people who aren't adaptable, it's the idea that they stick with one thing, like, oh, honor, family, that's my value. And it never changes their entire life, even when it doesn't serve them to, to a great degree. Even when it's causing a lot of pain, they're still in that value. And, regardless of what happens around you, being adaptable and being flexible is just one way to get through it. There are people who just get through it with sheer grit and, like a hard-nosed approach. And that's just another way to do it. But it's also another, it's more like, if you want to liken it to elements, it's an earth way compared to a water or an air way, without getting, too woo-woo or anything like that.
Yeah.
The point is that, you can just kind of like batten down the hatches, but you're also going to move a lot slower, and you're also going to come up with less creative beauty. And you're also going to find that people who act like that are based largely in their childhood. They're based largely in the past. They're not forward thinking. And so they don't necessarily shape the world in a way that promotes growth, but shaped in a world that creates restriction, as in, well, I want to keep it the way it is.
Well, yeah, it's with on the business side, it was important because we weren't able to see each other in person. So we're talking about very deep things about values of the business. What is it that we're going to do in the business? Because we had to shut down the showroom and our consultations during this, ask of our governments and the healthcare system to practice physical distancing.
Right.
And that was exercises that we did amongst the team of Human and Steve and I was, okay, what is it that we stand for in our values? How do we practice this now? If we just sit here and wait until the doors open up, we're losing this opportunity to reflect,
right,
reassess, and then recharge and build on areas that were strengths or address areas that we're being not spending enough attention to. Right. So we doubled down on so many areas, but then we also realized there was new opportunities and there were things that we weren't doing that wasn't in alignment with our values, or we weren't spending enough time that was there, but we just never, gave it the attention and effort that it deserved.
Right.
So, as a team, it's like, I think when we have values, it's also important not just to internalize them. You need to communicate it with people, whether it's business or your loved ones or your family, that it can be something like family values. It can be life values. It can be like, and a big thing is they need to be living, like they have to be practiced and they have to be action based, and held accountable to. So, it's like a blessing in disguise what happened, in the sense that, for us, when we didn't have anyone that was, thankfully no one that we are aware of that personally has been impacted by COVID. So we've had the opportunity to spend time with our family, but then to also look back at what does our business stand for? How do we adapt even though technically we don't need to? We know our business is going to exist. We can still continue the way things were, but I think that's a lost opportunity because there's definitely areas that can always improve. We just never had the time to allocate the energy and effort to do so.
Yeah.
So we are putting in the work and effort now. And when we spoke about this last week about adaptability and resilience, just in our general conversation, that's why I wanted to have this opportunity to have you share these skill sets and tools and your approach on this and the mindset that goes with it, because it's valuable to all people. Like at the end of the day, we're in the lifestyle fashion space. We do bespoke clothing. There's a lot of people that are in our network and clientele wouldn't think we would be speaking and talking about these things, but across all businesses and all aspects of life, this is very important. It's vital.
And I think this is where, like, we're an odd couple as well, but this is the shared value that we have is the elegance of a particular solution, or we can appreciate something as elegant. And so for me, one of my favorite things is about elegant thought or elegant solutions, where you can see someone put a bit of time and effort into crafting, stitching pieces together, stitching certain certain materials, variables, let's say fabrics together to create a piece. And you can appreciate what that piece is, the shape of that piece. Now, when it's a solution like, I love, like Sherlock Holmes style TV shows where they lay a trap, and it's an elegant trap. It's not just this kind of like knock on doors, make sure that you collect all the evidence type of solution to a crime. It's, when people throw money at a solution, at a problem to get to a solution, I don't respect it. I always think that, what did you do before you had money? Or what could somebody do who doesn't have money? Is there a solution there? And 99% of the time, there's going to be a solution that you just haven't seen, because it just requires a little bit more time to think of that elegant solution. So the brute force solution is just throw enough money at it,
Saying that, when you were talking about, your ability to react or adapt quickly, like sometimes it's not always about how quick it is. Sometimes it's like taking the time to, absorb what has happened and respond in a way that is more thought about and elegant, as opposed to just quick. And not all adaptability is based on time. No. I think that's important, as sometimes people can mistake that resilience or adaptability is how quick it is. Yeah. So there's a good analogy of this. I actually did this. This was at the very beginning of blogs. It just made me think about it. But Jim Brown, do you know who Jim Brown is?
I don't.
Okay, so Jim Brown is an American football player, and he played in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns, and I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, and he was probably one of the all-time greatest running backs. And when he played, this was a far different league. There was eye gouging, there was spearing, there was so much done that there would never be allowed to do in today's game. And then, of course, there was a ton of racism at that time in the States. And when he got tackled, instead of letting everyone know how strong and athletic and physically more equipped than a lot of the players in the league, he got up the exact same way on every hit, regardless if he got hit hard or if he got hit softly. He would get up in such a slow manner because it wouldn't let people see what that did to him.
Interesting.
So then they wouldn't understand like that, okay, we actually physically hurt him. But yet he would go after the game, get treated, and he would only get treated when the rest of his team wasn't there. So he would go before the games, before anyone was there, or stay way after the game. And his ability to, do this at a pace that allowed him to, that was his game plan. That was his way of not just getting up to say, hey, that didn't impact me, I'm totally fine, let's go on. It didn't give up his position of strength. Yeah. It allowed him, if he did get hit hard, he still was able to regroup, reset, be calm, and then come back, to be able to, take part in the game. And I think in business and in life and in sport, we tend to just focus on a little bit too much of how fast things are.
Yeah.
And I think that isn't always the case. Sometimes it does work to our benefit, but it's okay to slow things down and not react in a manner that COVID happens and we change our entire business and we try to be something that we're not.
So I think,
yeah,
there's a great part to this, which is I always take people through types of thinking or types of logic, because they just say that's not logical. And if I say to them, well, actually, like each culture and each country has their own version of logic. And each place that has a history will have a series of values which will inform logic as well. So cultural logic is one type of logic, but there's also a conditioned logic that is a mix of cultures, for example. And one of the conditioned logics is this idea that we have to behave in certain ways when certain situations happen.
Yes.
So I'm sure you felt it. I know I have. Like, the part that I'm thinking of is when someone dies around you, like you're not allowed to laugh, ever. You have to have a certain period of time where no one can see you smiling or having fun. Meanwhile, that's almost what you need is a reconnection with people around you to feel okay and to deal with the loss. So something like that happens. That's a big deal. But you feel like you have to always wear the sad face, and you start to maybe get angry at yourself for not crying in public so that people can see that you're sad. Like you have to show that you're sad or something like that. And as men, a lot of the time in the Western world, we also have this feeling of we can't cry in public, like somehow it's weak to cry in public.
Yeah.
And these are conditioned logics, where for me, one of my values, or rather one of the topics that I love talking about is weakness is actually a strength skill. If you want to connect with a person, talking about your successes versus your failures, which one is actually going to create a stronger connection?
Exactly. No, it's on the failures because, so there's that commonality. And then it's also from a humility standpoint.
Exactly.
It's not focusing on things that are just always on the positives. But that's where I think when we look at this conditioned logic in the time we're in, we've never been here before.
Exactly.
So a lot of people, I think, and I've spoken to so many people that, the first few weeks were extremely challenging because it was so unknown. And then it was also adapting to a new environment and then different variables that we were never under before. Now, it's also like we so many people are finding the silver lining and trying to focus on the positives, which is encouraging to see. And then at the same time, it's how do we, surround yourself with people that I think are being positive, consuming stuff that's being positive, but then on a personal level, understanding what your values are, what you're trying to achieve, how do you come out of this, but then not just use this as the one opportunity that it's just this time that we're in with COVID. There's going to be other challenges in life. There's going to be other components that happen in our families, in our businesses, in our health that are going to exist. How do we equip ourselves to be able to respond and handle that and do these kind of practices that, whether it's focusing on breath, writing down your values, reconnecting to what is your core being and what makes you tick, and then set your intentions of what you're planning on doing. I think it is something that we as professionals, as businesses, as individuals, parents, athletes, whatever that may be, these are two areas, both resiliency and adaptability are key kind of topics that I think people should delve in further. And I know that if it wasn't for our communication and conversation that we've had together, Justin, as well as with my also my business coach, Heinrich, I think it would be challenging for me if I didn't have that. So I'm very thankful that we can have this dialogue and conversation, because it is these kind of conversations that make you just be aware of different insight and ideas and concepts, and a form of logic that might be similar, but it's said through and articulated in a manner that's slightly different, that makes me understand this a little bit more. And it's through my conversations with yourself and Heinrich and clients and mentors and family and friends, and consuming more of what is, challenging me to come out of this stronger, both on a personal and business level. It is something that we also should be looking for, that kind of network that creates that environment.
Yeah.
And it is achievable, whether it's through platforms on social, whether it's through family and networks, or whether it's through business. But I do think it's very hard pressed for an individual just to do it on their own without having a community.
So I was going to add this earlier on. There's actually a neuroscience to having values, and like you were saying, adapting and upgrading the value structure of Style by Sarai to accommodate everyone and to make sure that the values in the group are aligned as well, which is that they did brainwave experiments where they could actually measure the brainwaves of a group. And if the brainwaves of the group were synchronized, that the group was actually, they worked better, they worked faster, and their performance was actually better. So
actually, we do that for every bespoke fitting. We do that. That's a part of our business. No, we could do something. Oh, that's amazing. But that's the, so go on, continue. I apologize.
yeah, and so it's the idea that if your brainwaves aren't synchronized, if you literally aren't on the same wavelength as people that you work with in a team or in a company or an organization, you're looking at profit losses. You're looking at a decreased performance, but I would actually say a failure of service to the clients in some way, shape, or form. That misalignment is actually going to show itself, and the client's going to get a sense of that. Now, with regard to what we're coping with as well, it's this idea of support, and like you were saying, the social brain. This is there's a theory that says the number one reason we developed a brain is for our survival. It's social structures. And so where do we feel the most safe is where we feel that we can do anything or say anything and people will accept us for who we are. And that type of thing with regard to support in business, support at home, friendships, that type of support. And this is one of the biggest things, is that social structure, especially in the West, we're told you should do it on your own, or you should be powerful enough to do it without anyone. You shouldn't need anyone. And that's a load of, it's a lot of hogwash,
It's until I went through exercises to determining values, I didn't have that the first few years of my business. And when I was working with Heinrich to do that, it was a long exercise. But what I realized when we went through that, there was former colleagues that were part of Sarai in the past, that there was no alignment to our actual living values. So here we are clashing in some way, and there's a reason they aren't part of the team anymore, but it wasn't really their fault. We just didn't share the same values.
Right.
And it's but it wasn't until I was able to articulate and determine if I was connected to those and I lived those, that those were real values. So now it's by understanding it, it allows me to then create a community that's more about, there's harmony in there.
Mm.
And I think that's, it's something that when we look at, values and when we look at all of these components, it is about revisiting them. And then it's repetition. It isn't something that you do at one point and then it's done. It is something, it's a skill. It requires practice. It also requires saying that it's never going to be perfect, and nor should it be. Yeah. There's always room for growth. So we have a few minutes left before this ends, this hour. I know we can chat for hours. But is there any last things you want to share? I just want to, I'm already thankful that you work with friends and clients, and you work with myself. We have 2 minutes remaining. What would you like to end the conversation with, Justin?
I think one of the main points to just maybe conclude everything and round up is this idea that marketing that's out there will always try and sell you something. You need to read this book. You don't understand anything without this book. And it's all about these hooks to information that you don't need. And more to the point, it's you do have everything you need. It needs to be tended to like a garden. You need to grow it. You need to cultivate it. You need to get some input on what to trim and what to promote. And like our value systems, our networks, where do we get our information from? It's never going to be a new thing. It's always, let's develop the capacity with the things that we already have. And that's the whole point that I'd like to see a lot more of, is developed capacity.
I love that, develop capacity, because as you mentioned earlier, it's we all have that capacity within us.
Without a doubt, yeah.
So it's how do we, address that accordingly and approach it with a game plan and with foundational, research and science behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's been one of my things that I've really appreciated, that whatever you do a deep dive in and then you start to teach and live and try, is that you do give it a try, you learn, and you try to practice it from not a brute force, but from an elegant solution. So Justin, I just want to say you know, we'll have a few conversations going forward about various topics, and I'm looking forward to building on that. And as always, I truly value our friendship, both on a personal and business level. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Jay. And it's always a pleasure.
Take it easy.
I love our talks. Take care.